Hello and welcome to the day 2 of the Advanced Audit and Assurance Practice to Pass webinar for June 2019 exams being organized by ACCA Pakistan. I am your tutor, Kashif Kamran. Now, just before starting on with the day 2 proceedings, I would first like to do a quick recap of the day 1 yesterday. On the first day, I was focusing on the audit risk and the risk of material misstatement. And in terms of the first day, we understood what are common mistakes students do when they are writing in an audit risk question or a risk of material misstatement question. During the session yesterday, I even made you realize the marking scheme of a question on audit risk and a risk of material misstatement. And I even spent time on how to go about analytical procedures when examiner specifically ask for them in a question on audit risk and risk of material misstatement. I even demonstrated in the session yesterday that how you gain the 5 marks from analytical procedure when it has been specifically asked for. And it is not just the ratio, it is also the connection of the ratio with the associated risk, which will give you the 5 marks. We even spent time yesterday on the examiner technique article, which was a very wonderful article in terms of defining what problem students do in an exam question on audit risk. And I hope you must have started to read the article of examiner on exam technique part 2, which was on audit risk. Now, from day 1 yesterday, the focus shifts now on day 2. And the day 2 is all about evidence and procedures. Another core area of the Advanced Audit and Assurance exam, and another area which is a regular feature of a 100 marks paper. So in the session today, over the next 3 hours, I will be drilling the area of evidence and procedures. Initially, I will be guiding you about the mistakes the student do in a question on procedures and in a question on evidence. I will be making your mindset very clear initially about what we should be doing when a question is on a procedure and what exactly we should be doing when a question is on evidence. What are common mistakes and errors we do in a question on evidence and procedures? The marking scheme, because again, many of the students are unaware of the marking scheme, so I will keep a very strong focus on the marking scheme as well, so we have a very clear idea about how much to write in the exam paper. And I'll be using the examiner article, which is on audit procedures in the session today, again to make you realize about mistakes we do in a question on procedure and evidence. Now, I have purposely chosen 2 questions on procedure and 1 question on evidence for my June 2019 session. If you see on your screen on the left hand side, you can see the session questions which I will be doing in the session today. One is December 15, question number 1B. One is December 16, question number 1C. Both of these are on procedures. Then I'll be doing December 17, question 2, which is basically on evidence. I'll be spending a bit less time on evidence because again that has been something which I have been consistently discussing since the March 18 webinar. On the right hand side of your screen you can see the March 18 webinar, June 18 webinar, September 18 webinar, December 18 webinar, and the last one, the March 19. In each of these webinars I have focused on evidence. So if you want to clarify yourself on evidence and you want to have a better understanding of evidence, you can go down and watch the previous webinars on the ACCA Pakistan channel on Vimeo. But I'll try to focus more on procedures in the June 2019 session, because again, I believe that has been a weak area and that has been an area which has been addressed lesser in the previous webinars. So I'm not omitting evidence from this day 2, but I'm keeping slightly less time for evidence and comparatively more time for procedures. Then there are two home questions which you will be doing yourself. One is December 18 question 2B as a home question, and one is June 14 question 3A as a home question. These resources have been shared with you, so you can access to these questions, home questions and session questions. The good thing with the session questions is that you will be getting the answers, so you can exactly see how to write an answer, and then you can do that yourself when you're doing a home assignment. Okay, now that was just the opening structure of the day 2. Now let's start directly with the agenda of day 2. Now, when we look at this topic in the Advanced Audit and Assurance exam, let me take on the Word file, which I use consistently across the 5 days, which is right in front of your screen. I was using the same file yesterday for day 1, and I even shared this file on the WhatsApp group at the end of the session. I'll be sharing the same at the end of the day 2 today. Okay, now what exactly we need to understand? When we look at the AAA exams, and we look at the requirements of the AAA exams in terms of the question, there are two things we need to understand. Number one, there is a question which asks for recommend the audit procedures, or recommend the procedures, or recommend the principal audit procedures on something, question mark. This is a very regular feature, right? That the examiner tends to ask a student recommend the audit procedures, or recommend the procedures, or recommend the principal audit procedures on a fill in the blank situation in the exam paper. Now we find this question somewhere in the exam paper, but ideally we will find this question in the first 50 marks case study. I was even discussing that yesterday when I was bifurcating the first question for you at the start of the session yesterday, that this question on procedure you will find mostly in the question number 1 of the 50 marks case study, and ideally this is worth 6 to 10 marks in the first question. So on average there is 6 to 10 marks weightage of procedures in the first question. Apart from that, this question can also be part of the question 2 or question 3, because procedures is a regular feature of exam. Now just an example. In the first question, it's high likely that you will find a 6 to 10 marks procedure, because that has been a very regular practice of the examiner. Elsewhere in the paper, you might find it or you might not find it. For example, for the June 19 exams, forensic audit, audit of performance information is very important. Now, if you have seen past papers of forensic audit and audit of performance information, which I will be doing on Friday, the day 4, in my live session, in the topic forensic audit and in the topic audit of performance information, you get to write procedures. So what if examiner gives you a question 3 on forensic or a question 3 on audit of performance information? Just an example. So when a question comes on forensic audit or audit of performance information, if you have seen the past papers, and I will make you realize that in the live session on Friday, that you will get procedures in these topics. So procedures are ideally placed in the first question, but they can also be somewhere in question 2 or 3. That depends upon the examiner setting the paper, right? So procedures can come in topics like forensic, and in topics like audit of performance information. And I'll be doing these two topics in the session on Friday. So that's the first thing, right? We are understanding today is to write procedures, irrespective they come in the first question or they come elsewhere in the paper. And again on the Friday session, in the Friday session, you will again realize the importance of procedures. So twice over the 5 days, you will start to realize the procedures today and on Friday. Okay, then the second requirement of the question, which comes in AAA paper, is where the examiner asks you to comment on the methods and explain the audit evidence you should expect to find during the review of the working paper file. Now, this was a question which exactly came in the March 2019 exams, the last exam sitting. An examiner placed this in the question number 2 because this is a question which comes at a completion stage. And I mentioned yesterday that the question number 2 is at the stage of completion. So this is a very typical question, right? You must have seen this question in the past paper, which starts with comment on the matters, and then it goes down to explain the evidence you should expect to find during the review of the working paper file. I have covered this question many times in my previous webinar, so I will be giving comparatively less time to this question during my June 2019 webinar. I'll be focusing on the first question more specifically. Let's start with the requirement 1, then go down with requirement 2 to understand what exactly we should be doing in exam paper. Okay, let's start the journey first with audit procedures. If the question asks you to write audit procedures, what should we be doing as students to score 100% marks on procedures? First of all, we should know the marking scheme of the procedures. Each procedure is worth 1 mark. So you will first see how many marks you have: 6 marks, 10 marks, 11 marks. And according to that, you know how many procedures you have to write in exam context. So each procedure is worth 1 mark. Then secondly, how to write a good procedure. Is there any support available by ACCA? Another question: what mistakes students do in writing procedures? What are bad procedures? Perhaps these are all the questions which pop which pop in the mind of a student when the student sits to study a topic known as procedures. And through my session today, I will be addressing each of these questions: 2, 3, 4, 5. So by the end of the session today, you have a very clear idea of what is a good procedure. Is there any support available by ACCA on writing procedures? What mistakes students do when they're writing procedures? And what are some examples of a bad procedure in P7 or the Advanced Audit and Assurance paper? Okay, so I've set the questions which might be there in your mindset as well. So we'll be solving each of these questions before we take on practice. Okay, let's go down first. Is there any support available by ACCA or the examiner? And the answer is yes. Interestingly, I think the resources which have been shared with you as the handouts of the day two, the handouts of the day two contains an article which is right in front of your screen now. This article is titled Part 4 Procedures. Yesterday we were doing Part 2 Risk. Today we are doing Part 4 Procedures. I have no idea how many of you in the live session today have read this article. Give me a quick feedback. How many of you have read this article, Audit Procedure? Go down with your answers quickly. How many of you have read this article on Audit Procedure? Okay, how many of you even knew this? There is an article on Audit Procedure. Did you knew there is an article on Audit Procedure? Okay, that's good enough, right? Okay, some of you knew there is an article on an audit procedure. Some of you have no idea even that there is an article on audit procedure. Equally, some of you have read it and some of you have not. But I will be reading that for you so that you realize how important this article is. Now, examiner has given you the support, right? And when the examiner has given you the support and you're not using the support of the examiner, you are calling yourself into troubles. Examiner will criticize you and will severely criticize you, because once the examiner writes something and you don't read it and you do the same mistake in the exam paper, then the examiner will be very harsh. So there is a support. Don't ignore the support. Read the support so that you can make wonderful procedures in your June 2019 exams. Let's go down with this article on audit procedure. Let's see what the examiner is trying to tell us in this article. I'll not be reading the full article because I just want to give you a path. You will get the path and you will continue on the path after the session ends today. The very first thing which I would like to highlight from the examiner article quickly is the very first paragraph which is in front of your screen, which says the advanced audit and assurance exam would not be complete without testing relevant procedures. So examiner is saying 100 marks paper of P7 or advanced audit and assurance is incomplete without examiner asking procedures. So that sends a very strong message to all of you that are we expecting procedures in 100 marks paper? Absolutely. Can we expect 0 marks on procedures? Can we expect 0 marks on procedures? Examiner says no, not at all. Then examiner goes down in the article and says that the examiner goes down and right in the next paragraph tells us something more important. Examiner says this article examines the key syllabus requirement in relation to the procedures and consider the level of detail needed in order to obtain credit at this level. So examiner is saying, I am writing this article to support you how to write a procedure which is worthy of a credit. Credit means marks at this level. How can you write a good procedure at this level? Examiner is saying you need not to worry about that. Examiner is giving you a guidance on that. So let's see what guidance examiner is specifically giving to all of you to get good marks when you write a procedure at the level of P7. Then the examiner goes down and he picks the first heading, which is the heading of the syllabus requirement. And in the heading of the syllabus requirement, examiner justify what exactly the examiner will be asking you. Let's read that. Audit procedures are covered in several areas of the AAA syllabus, and the relevant learning outcome requires candidates to identify and describe the audit procedures to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence from the identified source, or to design appropriate audit procedures. or to design audit procedures with respect to the audit of the financial statement or other assignments. I just told you that on Friday, when I do the other assignments, which is forensic and audit of performance information, you will again come across procedures. So examiner is saying either the procedures can come for audit of historical financial statement or the procedures can come for other assignments. So I just mentioned that at the beginning of my session today. So the examiner is saying that the student should know to describe a procedure or the student should know to design a procedure. Now, just one thing before I further read the examiner article. Recently, the syllabus guide of a AAA paper was updated and examiner has introduced a better word which is known as design and audit procedure. Rather than examiner says explain an audit procedure, recommend an audit procedure, examiner thinks this is a much better word, design an audit procedure, because examiner believe design an audit procedure cannot be rote learned, because you have to design an audit procedure in the context of the case study, because a lot of students rote learn audit procedures and the examiner will be criticizing that in the same article. Now, what exactly design means? Design means something which is case specific and something which is altered to the case situation, or something which is contextualized. So examiner says this is the new word. Examiner says you need to design an audit procedure, and that is a much deep word to understand. So design is according to specifications, right? Design means that is not something off the shelf. Design means something which is bespoke. You need to customize. You need to customize. So design means you are customizing something. So can we rote learn a procedure? Examiner says no, you cannot rote learn the procedure. Rather, you need to design a procedure. So you go to the exam hall, you see a case, and according to the case, you customize the procedure. So customization is what we are learning today, right? How to customize a procedure. So another question coming into my mind, how to customize a procedure. So see, rather you asking me the questions, I am raising the questions to you. These are all the questions which pop in the mind when I sit to study the topic audit procedure. Okay, so is that clear with everyone? The word design and audit procedure. So design has to be case specific, design has to be customizing, and I will be teaching you in the session today how would you go down with customizing an audit procedure. Okay, back to the article of the examiner. Now, a very important paragraph, have a very strong focus on it. Note that these learning outcomes Note that these learning outcomes require candidates to design or describe audit procedures, not simply provide a list of sources of evidence or verbs with no purpose, such as review. Examiner is saying you need to design a procedure, not simply provide a list of sources, such as review. You cannot just write in the exam paper review full stop. Examiner is saying you need to design a procedure, not simply provide a list of sources of evidence or a verb with no purpose. A procedure without a purpose is useless. So examiner is saying don't just tell me the verb, also tell me the purpose why you are writing the procedure. Just keep that in mind. Then the examiner says when audit procedures are required as part of the exam, it is expected that for credit to be awarded, candidates will describe the procedure in sufficient detail. So you need to describe the procedure in sufficient detail to demonstrate that they understand what it is trying to corroborate and why, what underlying piece of evidence will assist with that process. So examiner don't want you just to write a verb, rather than the examiner wants you to justify the procedure and to demonstrate what you are trying to achieve through the procedure. I'll be demonstrating that in the session. Then the examiner comes with something quick. Examiner says a good rule of thumb, a good rule of thumb is to ask, if you give your list of procedures to a new trainee auditor, would they know what to do, how to do, and why are they doing it? Suppose you write a procedure on a paper and you give this to a junior, a trainee, and your procedure is so blur, your procedure is so vague that the trainee does not know what to do, how to do. So examiner is saying when you write a procedure back at home, think about whether your procedure has what to do, how to do. If your procedure have what to do, how to do, then that is a complete procedure. But if your procedure does not have what to do, how to do, that is an incomplete procedure. So you can criticize your own procedure, right, by looking at this rule of thumb given by the examiner. And then the last thing, which I will consider as the most important thing to start the practice. Okay, the most important thing. If there is a specific source, if there is a specific source of information and an action that is aimed at a specific purpose, then the answer is more likely to be complete and understandable. Examiner has given us a clue. Examiner is saying if there is a specific source, so what is the first thing the examiner is telling us? When you are writing a procedure, when you're writing a procedure, there has to be a specific source. Number one. Number two, there has to be a specific action. And number three, there has to be a specific purpose. So three things. Can you see those three circles on your screen? Examiner is saying when you're writing a good procedure should have a source, a good procedure should have an action, a good procedure should have a purpose. So I'm taking that as the golden rule given by the examiner, and I take this on my Word file. What is a good procedure? A good procedure should have an action, a good procedure should have a source, and a good procedure should have a purpose. Cut short. A good procedure should have ASP. So if I ask you what is a good procedure, you should quickly respond to me, a good procedure is equal to ASP. And if someone asks you what is an ASP, you will say A is the action, S is the source, P is the purpose. Is everyone clear on that ASP? Give me your quick answers. Is ASP given by the examiner, or is this being derived from an unauthentic source? This has come from a very authentic source, right? Examiner is saying when you are writing a procedure should be A, action, S, source, P, purpose. I circle that in the examiner article, right? So will you remember that mnemonic for exam paper, ASP, for writing a good procedure? Okay, that's wonderful. I'll be demonstrating, right, ASP once I start the practice phase of the session. Okay, so how to write a good procedure. Okay, now let's go down with some exercise. So what is the first thing a good procedure should have? Action. Actions. Let's make a list of actions. Review, recalculate, inquire, discuss, analyze. Actions, right? So a procedure should start with actions. Yes, even reperform, even observe. I'm just giving you some examples, right? So can you see the list of actions as examples? So a procedure should start with an action. A lot of times student says this is a verb. Exactly, this is a verb. So let's be very open. Action is basically a verb. Bracket close. Okay, source. A procedure should have a source. Source is what? Document. Source documents. For example, source document can be a board minutes. Source document can be a purchase invoice. Source document can be a lease agreement. Source document can be a bank statement. Source document can be a cash book. Source document can be a fixed asset register, etc. So source, what is the source? Document. Is 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 the source very essential to write a procedure? Right? So examiner is saying you should have an action. Examiner is saying you should have a source. And examiner is saying you should have a purpose. So that is what making a good procedure for exam context. So a good procedure, right? Action, source, and the last thing, a good procedure should have purpose. Purpose means reason. Reason for doing the procedure. Objective. Objective of the procedure. The purpose of a procedure could be to confirm what? To confirm approval of something, to confirm accuracy of something, to confirm completeness of something, to confirm uh, the validity of the management assumptions. There can be many reasons, right? There can be many reasons of making a procedure. So I can confirm assumptions, validity of the assumptions. I can confirm the completeness of something. I can test. Suppose I do a recalculation. So the basic purpose of recalculation is to confirm the accuracy. If I see the board minutes, the basic purpose of the board minutes is approval, right? Even if I look at the source document, the basic purpose of source document is to check the completeness of things. Yes, even the valuation, right? To confirm the valuation. So when we write a procedure in exam paper, we are writing a procedure with a reason. Example. Let's take an example. Suppose you write a procedure. Number one, let's see how would you treat them in exam paper. I write a procedure in the exam paper. Purchase invoice. Will I get any marks for this? Because I only written a source. Okay, number two, I write a procedure in the exam. Review the purchase invoice. Is number 2 better than number 1? The number 2 only have a source. Number 2 have a action plus a source. But is number 2 telling me why am I reviewing the purchase invoice? So is it a incomplete procedure? Right? Then comes the number 3. Review the purchase invoice for the machine to confirm the purchase value of the to confirm the purchase value and reconcile to confirm the purchase value as appearing in the fixed asset register, or to confirm the ownership of the machine. So is the third procedure telling me the action? Is the third procedure telling me the source? And is the third procedure telling me the purpose? Review was the action. Let's make them colors. Review is the action yellow. Purchase invoice is green, that is the source. And to confirm, blue, that is the purpose. So can you three distinct colors in number 3? The yellow, the green, the blue. The yellow is the action, the green is the source, the blue is the purpose. So is that a complete procedure? So how many marks will I get for the first procedure? Examiner says you will get how many marks for the first procedure? Examiner says 0. Examiner says how many marks will you get for the second procedure? 0.5. And examiner says how many marks will you get for the last procedure? Complete 1 mark. Complete 1 mark. Now it's up to you how you do this in June 19 exams. This is just the first of the many examples to come in the live session today. So can you realize 1, 2, 3? And can you relate this with yourself if any one of you in the live session are repeating P7, the advanced audit and assurance paper? Can you realize the mistakes you do? So if any one of you is repeating P7, please relate yourself with the situations here, because the better learning of this practice to pass session is to identify your weaknesses. If you are capable of identifying your weaknesses, that is a very good learning of this session. So have you identified your mistakes? Let's do the next exercise. Suppose I write a procedure in an exam paper, number next. Example 2. Number 1. Observe asset. Right? Observe asset. I'm only telling the action. Observe asset. I'll get 0. Then change this to the next one. Physically examine machine. Now, physically examine machine is better than observe asset, because asset was specified. Over here, the word asset was very generic. You made the word asset very specific here by writing the word machine. Physically examine is a better way of starting a procedure because you physically examine the machine, because machine is something tangible. Anything which is tangible can be physically examined. But when you come down with a better procedure for the third one, you will simply say in the exam paper, for example, physically examine the machine at the premises of the company to confirm that the machine exists. Physically examine was what? Physically examine was the physically examine is what? Action, a source, a procedure. Physically examine is an action. Yellow. Premises. What is premises? Is premises an action, source, or a purpose? Premises is the source. Okay. And to confirm the existence is the purpose. So are you getting the track here on number 2 as well? So how many marks will I get for the third situation is equal to 1 mark. So can you do this action, source, action, source, purpose, right? Let's take another example, probably the last one. Example 3. See the third example, review management calculation for the provision made. Sounds better. Review management calculation for provision recognized. But is the first procedure telling me why am I reviewing the management calculation? Review the management calculation for the provision recognized. For what? For the accuracy of the provision? For the completeness of the provision? For the assumptions used in provision? What am I reviewing? Am I just reviewing the calculation, or am I reviewing the basis of calculation, the validity of the calculation, the accuracy of the calculation? So if I need to make a better procedure, will I write this way? Review management calculations for provision recognized to confirm the validity, to confirm the validity of the assumptions used, to confirm the validity of the assumptions used to recognize provision, and to confirm and to further confirm the completeness of the provision. Why am I looking at the management calculation? Is there a reason of looking at the management calculation? Do you all agree with that? Am I looking at the management calculation for validity, number one? Am I looking at the management calculation for completeness of the provision? And even accuracy, right? Even accuracy, even reasonableness. All of these answers are perfectly right. Accuracy, reasonableness. So you can use these words, right, in this situation. But are you getting the track? What the examiner was trying to say, ASP? Will you be able to write a better procedure? considering you know a action, you know a source, you know a purpose. When you write a procedure back at home, will you ask a question to yourself that whether my procedure consists of a, whether my procedure consists of an S, whether my procedure consists of a P, and if all the three are present in your question, then that is a wonderful procedure. So will that help you to have your own self appraisal? Can you do your own self appraisal, ASP, when you're writing a procedure? Yes or no? So is ASP helping you here in terms of writing a procedure? So can ASP help us to customize a procedure? Right? Okay. Let's continue the exercise on procedures. Still, I have to give you many examples on procedures. These are just three of the many examples to come in the session today. And probably by the end of the session, you will have a perfect picture of procedures. Let's go back reading the examiner article and need to justify some more things from the examiner article before I take on the practice myself. Then look at the examiner article. There is such a strong heading in the examiner article which says how to structure procedures. See, your examiner is even telling you how to structure procedures. And the examiner is telling you in the paragraph here, see this last line of the examiner article. The examiner is telling you how to structure procedures for 1 mark and half mark. So I just demonstrated that to you, how you can structure your procedures for 0 marks, half mark, 1 mark. So you need to take eventually 1 mark. A difference between failing at 47, 48, 49. Have you ever imagined how many times we lose half a mark across our 100 marks paper? And can you imagine accumulation of these half a mark, accumulation of these half a mark we lose in every question we do in AAA can be a big difference between passing and failing, and can be a big difference between 47 and 50. So you need to score 1 mark per procedure, not half a mark per procedure. Okay, then the examiner gives you some examples. I'll be doing that with you in the session today, so I'm just ignoring that for the time being. You need to read this article in full, right? Now you go down, and then the examiner says that the procedure needs to be adapted. That's a big problem. We don't adapt. We are good at rote learning. We are bad at adapting. How many of you adapt to the situation given in the exam paper? How many of you know exactly what is adapting? I'll be guiding you today in the session how we adapt, because most of the student will rote learn a procedure. They will have a BPP textbook, or they will have a Kaplan textbook. That is a wonderful resource to study AAA. But from the textbook, you will just learn the procedures, and then you will expect in the exam that you get a share-based payment, and you will recall what share-based payment I did in BPP or Kaplan. Then you recall I did a restructuring provision from the BPP book. If I get a restructuring provision in the exam paper, I will just copy paste the procedures I did in the textbook. So textbook is rote learning, but you need to adapt. You need to adapt to the situations given in the exam. And I believe students don't adapt to the circumstances. Do you all agree with that? Particularly those who flunked in the last exams and are repeating back in June. Do we adapt? Examiner is saying you need to adapt. So all of you know the meaning of the word adapt, right? Is to be specific to the case study. So that's another very important thing to be learned in the session today. That is for a good procedure should be adaptive. What was the first thing to write a good procedure? ASP. right? Now, what is the second thing to write a good procedure? It should be adaptive. So at the end of the session, in the last 10 minutes, I'll be asking you some questions. So please ensure you are taking notes very carefully. If I ask you at the end of the session, what makes a procedure good? The first answer would be it should have an ASP. Second is it should be adaptive. Let's see number three, number four. So far, two. Okay, let's take some examples of adaptive. Now, when you write an adaptive procedure, you have a case study, right? And in a case study, examiner will tell you a story. Now, that story is basically what I believe. The story is basically known as the flagged facts given by the examiner, right? Suppose the examiner gives you a situation on asset held for sale. An asset held for sale, examiner writes a story on asset held for sale. Now, I look at the heading asset held for sale. I recall that I read in the Kaplan book or the BPB book procedures for asset held for sale, and I start writing all the procedures I learned in the book. Rather than I should have read the story of the examiner to see what the examiner is writing on asset held for sale. And from the story of the examiner, I should have identified the flagged facts and converted the flag facts to procedures. And I'll be demonstrating that shortly. If you were in the live session yesterday, when we were attempting a question on risk, did I mention that most of the time students write speculative risk and they ignore the flagged risk? Can you respond to that? Did I mention that in the session yesterday that the student writes speculative risk and they ignore the flagged risk? Same problem here, that you write journal procedures and you ignore the flagged procedures. So is a flagged procedure more important, or is the procedure given in the Kaplan or the BPP book more important? So should I read the story of the examiner to gain marks? Okay, let's do a demonstration. Flagged facts. So case study, examiner will tell you a story. Convert the flagged facts to procedures using ASP. So convert the flagged facts. Right, so you need to convert the flagged facts to procedures using ASP. Let's do an exercise. There is a session question, right, which I have shared with you. You can see that right in front of your screen. In this question, the examiner is telling us that you should perform procedures examiner is telling us that we should perform procedures on two things. Can you see the two things given by the examiner? Procedures on valuation of work in progress and procedures on the recognition and the measurement of the government grant. So should I read the story of the examiner about work in progress given in the case study? Should I read the examiner's story about the government grant in the case study? Or should I just recall the procedures I learned from the book on the government grant? So should I be reading the story of the grant given by the examiner and the story of the work in progress given by the examiner? So just a thought process, right? You go down the case study, and in the case study you will see a paragraph here which is written on the government grant. This is a story of the examiner about the grant. Then there is a paragraph given by the examiner on work in progress. See this paragraph. This paragraph is about work in progress. So I should read these two paragraphs, one for the government grant, one for the work in progress. I cannot write journal procedures. This is the flagged facts, and I have to convert the flagged facts to the ASP, action source procedure. I'll be doing this exercise just in 5 minutes. Then another question I have to do with you in the session today. The next one, go to the next page of this handout. You will see another question, the Z communication group. When you look at this question, the Z communication group, and you read the requirements, can you find a procedure given over here in the part C? Can you see the two procedures? Examiner wants us to write procedures on 50% equity shareholding in WTC as a joint venture. Right? The company has acquired 50% shares of a company WTC, and they have recognized that 50% equity shares as a joint venture. So we need to make procedures on joint venture. Will I recall the joint venture procedures I did in the Kaplan and BPP book? Or will I read the story of joint venture given by the examiner? You go down the case and you will see the story of a joint venture given by the examiner right over here. In March 2016, ZCG purchased 50% equity shares. So is the examiner giving me a story of a joint venture? Should I read this story of joint venture? Right? So the management has classified the 50% equity shareholding as a joint venture. So I need to make procedures that the classification has been right of the joint venture. And is there a paragraph given on this? The second thing the examiner wants me to do is that he wants me to write procedures on intangible assets recognized in respect of the license to operate in farmland. Am I writing journal procedures on intangible, or am I writing license to operate in farmland? Intangible recognized in respect of the license to operate in farmland. So should I start writing any procedures on intangible assets, or should I keep my procedure specific to the license? I need your responses quickly. Will I be writing procedures on intangible in journal, or will I be writing procedures on license? And will license be given in the case study? Should I read the story of the license? Okay, let's see where is the story of the license. See the next paragraph. Can you see in the next paragraph, examiner is writing that in January 15, the company purchased a license. Can you see the first line of this paragraph? It says the ZCG purchased a license to operate in farmland. So are you understanding what basically means adaptive? Adaptive means read the story of the examiner, because when you read the story of the examiner, you will exactly know how to convert that to ASP. Is that clear to everyone? So just before I start doing a drill with you, is everyone clear with this? A good procedure should be adaptive. Case study, examiner will tell you a story. From the story, you need to identify the flagged facts and convert the flagged facts to procedures using ASP. All of you know what ASP is. Now, all of you know what a flagged fact is. So, in the context of the questions we have in the sessions today, the flagged facts was work in progress. The flagged fact was government grant. The flagged fact was joint venture. And the flagged fact was a license. So did we found all these as flagged facts in the cases to do in the session today? And I have to convert these facts to ASP. Okay, last thing, and we are starting with the exercise on the flagged facts. Now, when you look at the last part of the examiner article on procedures, where we saw this heading adapting the basic technique to the AAA exams, examiner goes down and examiner then puts focus on writing a strong and weak procedure. You please read this table. Writing a strong procedure and a weak procedure. Examiner has given this table for students' examples. Then comes some procedures which examiner says student write a lot but write wrongly. One procedure which examiner says student writes a lot and write wrongly is written representation from management. How many time you how many times you tend to write written representation in almost every procedures you write in exam paper? Give me an honest feedback. How many times you write written representation from management as a very common procedure in almost every situation you do in the exam paper? So I should find the criticism from the examiner for all of you. Okay, how to go about written representation from management? Number two, review the board minutes. How many times we write this procedure in exam paper? Review the board minutes. So examiner is saying these are most common procedures. These are most common procedures, and there are problems with these procedures. Review the board minutes, the written representation, and the last one, agree to the financial statement. Examiner says student write this procedure a lot. Agree to the financial statements. Right? So examiner has given you clarifications in this article. This is a 9-page article. And I honestly believe all of you have never read this article clearly, properly, with proper annotations. Have you ever read this article with clear annotations, underlining something, circling something, reading the lines of the examiner? Have you ever read it seriously? Reading an article is something different, right? And seriously reading an article is something different. So have you realized how to read an article just in the limitation of this session? So will you continue that trend for the later articles? Okay, now three things to get down and then starting on with the practice phase. Examiner says there are some common procedures student tends to write in exam paper, and there are some problems with these common procedures. Examiner is not denying that you should not write them, but examiner is saying there are some problems with common procedures. Three common procedures. Number one, the written representation from the management. Written representation from management is a very common procedure. We need to see when to use it and how to use it. When to use and how to use. Next, examiner says review the board minutes. When to use, how to use. So see, your examiner has given you so clarity on this. Then the examiner says agree the financial statements or agree to the financial statement. Examiner says when to use this procedure and how to use this procedure. Okay, three most common procedures examiner thinks student writes in exam paper, and examiner is very critical of the three procedures, telling you how to use it and when to use it. Let's go down with each one of them and let's conclude on this exercise of procedure. So immediately after the break, we can start on drilling procedures. Okay, let's go with the first one, written representation. Examiner says, when you think about a written representation from management to be written in the exam paper, you should ensure that they the written representation from the management is often requested to confirm the management intention or to confirm the validity of a judgment. So examiner is saying in the question you are solving an exam paper, if there is an intention of the management, then there is a need of a management representation letter. Or if you want to confirm the validity of a judgment, then you can take a written representation. For example, intention of the management. What can be an intention of the management? For example, the scenario tells you that management intends to sell a building. Management intends to sell a building. Intention of the management intends. So we can take a representation on the management intention that they stick to the intention. It's not they change their intention. So we can take representation on the management intention. Number two, management has an intention to close down a division, asset held for sale. Management intends to sell a building. Management intends to close down a division. These are management intentions, right? Or validity of a judgment, impairment. Validity of a judgment, impairment. The recoverable amount in the impairment. So examiner is saying if you want to use a written representation, you should use a written representation for a management intention given in the case study or for a validity of a judgment. How many times when we see past papers, we do see judgments in the case study, right? So if there is a management intention, whereas there is a validity of a judgment, examiner says you can take management representations. We can even take management representations for the foreseeable future. We can take management representation for the foreseeable futures. We can take management representation for assumptions used in making the forecast, in making forecasted financial statements, etc. So the bottom line is what? The bottom line is that you can take a representation from the management when you think there is an intention, there is a judgment of the management, there is an assumption taken by the management. All of these are good enough to take a representation from the management. But then how we write a representation in the exam paper is very wrong. Let's see what is a good way to write a representation and what is a wrong way to write a representation. Let's find that answer. A good procedure and a bad procedure on a written representation. Now, on a written representation, if you write a good procedure or if you write a bad procedure, if I write a bad procedure, I will say obtain a written representation from the management full stop. And I come out of the exam hall saying I got 1 mark. Will I get 1 mark for this procedure? Obtain a written representation from the management. What is missing? What is missing in this procedure? What is missing in this procedure? Purpose, reason, exactly. Obtain a written representation from the management. What is missing? On what? Am I telling on what am I taking a representation? Is that missing? On what am I taking the representation? Plus purpose. Purpose of taking the representation. So can you see the red? That is missing. So when you write a procedure, you have to do the same thing. Ask a question to yourself. Obtain a written representation on what and for what. So on what, for what. Now you write a good procedure. You say obtain a written representation from management on their on the completeness and accuracy of assumptions used to determine the recoverable amount used within impairment testing. Now see this procedure. Obtain a written representation from the management on what? On the completeness and accuracy of the assumptions used to determine the recoverable amount used within impairment testing. Now, is that a complete procedure now? Am I telling examiner on what am I taking a representation? And for what am I taking a representation? So in the exam, what you are thinking, representation on what and representation for what? Will you remember these two questions to write a good procedure on representation? Representation on what, for what? And if you write these two in your answer, you are taking a 1 mark credit for writing a representation in the exam paper. But remember, representation is a last resort. You cannot write representation as your first procedure in the exam paper because representation is the last resort. So if you are writing 5 procedures in the exam paper, probably the 5th procedure can be a written representation. But if you're writing 5 procedures in the exam hall, written representation cannot be the first procedure. Is everyone clear on written representation? When to use and how to use? Can I get your quick feedback? Is everyone clear on written representation, how to write it in the exam context? Okay, the second one, review the board minutes. I think this is more common. You might agree with me that student has a lot of tendency to review board minutes. Perhaps student believe that is the only procedure in AAA paper. Is that true? Student believe that review the board minute is the only procedure because they're so obsessed with review the board minutes. They can review board minutes for anything. Right? So uh, review the board minutes for a student. The student can do review the board minutes for anything in the exam paper. But examiner is very critical of when you should review the board minutes. Let's find the answer for that. Okay, now when you start to think about review the board minutes, first of all, Examiner says that when you think about review the board minutes, you should think that board minutes basically is number one, the procedure might be relevant when supporting management's intentions, just like a written representation, management intention or approval approval of a major decision. So examiner says that when can you use board minutes? Examiner says the procedure might be relevant. So examiner is very clear on that. The procedure might be relevant when supporting management intention, just like a written representation or approval of a major decision In one answer, can I write both? Review for an intention, I take review the board minutes, then I take a written representation for management intention. Will that be a good answer? For management intention, first I take the board minutes, and then for the management intention, I take the written representation. So in one answer, can I use both? Will that be a good answer? I can only use one of them, right? Either I use the board minutes or I use the written representation. I cannot just use both for the same thing. Is that clear with everyone? I cannot use both for the same thing, management intention. Let's take an example. The procedure might be relevant when supporting management intention or approval of a major decision. Now, the problem, major decisions. Examiner says major decisions are what? Examiner says major decisions are example, acquisitions, but examiner says it is not likely that the board approves every individual asset purchase, rather, the board approves the capital expenditure, budget at the start of the year. Right? So the management at the start of the year can approve the capital expenditure budget, right? In the question, it is written that the management purchased a plant and machinery. Will the management approve every single purchase of an asset? Give me an answer. Will management approve every single purchase of an asset? Or will they accumulatively approve the capex budget? So examiner is saying it is not likely that the board approves every individual asset purchase, rather than the board approves the capex budget at the start of the year. So we purchase a vehicle and the student write in the exam paper, review the board minutes for the approval of the vehicle. Is that right? Review the board minutes for the purchase of a machinery. Is that right? So are you getting the track from the examiner criticism here? So examiner is saying you can write the board minutes, but you need to be very careful about board minutes. Now let's find a good answer and a bad answer. Okay, let's find a good answer and a bad answer. Good, bad. Now, if I write a bad procedure first for board minutes, the bad procedure would be I simply write in the exam paper, review the board minutes, full stop. Now, am I telling review the board minutes for what and why? So, will I get any credit for this in the exam paper, review the board minutes? No. Then should I write a better procedure saying review the board minutes for the approval of the new subsidiary which was acquired during the year, review the board minutes for the approval of the new subsidiary which was acquired during the year, full stop. That's a complete procedure. Why am I reviewing the board minutes? For the approval. Approval of what? A new subsidiary. Is it something major? New subsidiary? And will the board approve the new subsidiary? Is it a vehicle? Is it a plant or machinery? No, it's a new subsidiary. So approval of the new subsidiary which was acquired during the year. That is a 1 mark procedure. But the bad procedure, review the board minutes, is only worth 0.5. But the first procedure, good one, is worth 1 full mark. Is that clear with everyone how to go about these procedures, which I believe is the most common procedures examiner do in exam paper? Just prior to getting to the first break, because I will be resuming with agree to the financial statement after the break, do you all agree that these are common procedures you do in exam paper? Review board minutes and management representation letter. Can you relate this with yourself? And have in this first 90 minutes of the session today, have you realized your mistakes? So can I get a quick feedback of the first 90 minutes of the session? Have you learned anything on procedures? Have you got any good solutions to procedures? So had this session so far help you with understanding procedures better? Did you had a better idea of procedures when you entered the session today? When you entered the session today and 90 minutes into the session, have you got a better understanding of procedures? Okay, now we are taking a break now, and in 15 minutes, when I resume back, we will start directly with the last one, which is agree to the financial statement, and we'll see common mistakes students do when they agree to the financial statement. And right after that, we will take some questions from the past paper because I need to demonstrate how we convert a flagged fact to ASP. So we'll do an exercise for that. And probably into the last half an hour of the session today, I will just be doing a quick review of the question which comes on evidence, because I mentioned in the start of the session that probably today I will be more focused on procedures, because in my previous webinars, I have focused a lot on evidence. So if you want to get good command on evidence, I will be doing that in the last half an hour. But if you want to get better command, you can watch my previous webinars on ACCA Pakistan channel on Vimeo. And if any question has been unanswered so far, you can put that on the WhatsApp group, and I can respond to your questions on the WhatsApp group over the next 24 hours. Okay, time for break. It's 9:25 Pakistan Standard Time. So at 9:40 Pakistan Standard Time, I'll be back live and we'll start the second phase of our discussions on procedures. Okay, time for a break. Okay, welcome back after the break into the second and last part of the day two of the AAA Practice to Pass for June 2019 exams. Now, we were looking at some of the common procedures examiner is writing in the article. We looked two of them. One was the written representation and one was review the board minutes. Now let's take on to the last one, which is to agree to financial statement. Now again, examiner is very critical of this agree to the financial statement. First of all, the examiner believe that when you are writing agree to the financial statement, you have to be very specific about what you agree in the financial statement. For example, examiner tells us that when you agree something in the financial statement, the financial statements contains accumulative values, not individual, not individual values. For example, receivable from Mr. A. Can I can I agree receivable from Mr. A to the financial statement? Give me the answer. Can I agree the receivable from Mr. A to the financial statements? No. Can I agree the total receivable to the financial statement? Okay. For example, total receivables. Which one sounds better to agree to financial statement? Receivable from Mr. A is a big receivable from Mr. A. Can I agree that to the financial statement? A big cross. Total receivable, can I agree this to the financial statements? Yes. This can agree to financial statements. So be very realistic in exam paper. What you agree in the financial statement. The financial statement contains the accumulative values. The financial statement does not contains the individual values. So intangible assets, the total of intangibles assets, tangible assets, the total of tangible assets, current assets. The financial statement does not contain every single transaction. So lot of time, for example, if I have to agree receivable from Mr. A, from where will I agree the receivable from Mr. A? Where will I get the individual receivable from Mr. A? Exactly. That's the right answer. Abimbola, breakup. We'll agree the individuals to the breakups. So from the breakups, I can agree Mr. A receivable balance. Farjad, yes, that can be, but it's better not to do that in exam paper. So, are you understanding that agree to financial statement is accumulative values? So, can I agree individual things to financial statement? Can I agree individual things to financial statements? Can I agree the individual things to the ledger? Can I agree the individual things to the journal ledger? Yes. Can I agree the individual things to the breakup of something? Yes. So please don't do this mistake in exam paper when you agree to financial statement and normally we write bad answers. For example, you write this a bad procedure and you write an exam paper agree to financial statements. Now this is a very blur statement, right? Agree to financial statement because you're not telling at all what you agree what you agree to financial statement and what was the purpose to agree. So you're not even telling what you agree, and you're not even telling the purpose of agree. Then a student writes a good procedure. And when a student writes a good procedure, he says, agree to financial statements, the disclosure, agree to the financial statement, the disclosure of the acquisition of a new subsidiary, that is the date the new subsidiary was acquired, and the of the consideration, fair value of the consideration, and the fair value of the consideration, and the fair value of net asset acquired. Close. C. Agree to the financial statement, the disclosure of the acquisition of the new subsidiary. Did we took the management? Did we took the board minutes for the approval of this new subsidiary? Did we took the approval of the acquisition of this new subsidiary just prior to the break? Now, because it was a major event, management must have given a disclosure of the new subsidiary in the financial statement. And what are they telling in the disclosure? The date the subsidiary was acquired, the fair value of the consideration, and the fair value of the net assets, so that the shareholder know how much goodwill has arisen from the purchase of the new subsidiary. Now, another bad procedure. Student writes in the exam paper, agree to the financial statement, the disclosure related, the disclosure for related party. Full stop. Examiner says you cannot write this way unless and until you tell what does a disclosure contain. Have I written in my procedure above what does a disclosure contain? Can you see the bracket? In the bracket I'm telling what does the disclosure contain. So normally the student have a tendency to write agree to the financial statement, the disclosure for something. But the examiner is saying when you are writing a disclosure for something, you need to write it properly. For example, you write this way: agree to the financial statements, the disclosure for related party, bracket open, that is the name of the related party, the name of the related party, and the transaction with the related party, and the value of the transaction, bracket close. Now see which of the related party procedure is right. You just tell agree to the financial statement, the disclosure of the related party. Examiner don't like that. Examiner likes the next one, agree to the financial statement, the disclosure for the related party, that is the name of the related party in the disclosure, and the transaction with the related party. So in the exam, will we only write disclosure, or will we specify what is contained in the disclosure? Are you learning this point? So in exam, don't just write disclosure, also mention what is contained in the disclosure. Is that an important point to remember for exam paper? Don't just write disclosure, also mention what is contained in the disclosure. Right? So have you learned something of a good and bad procedures in the last 90 minutes or so? So that completes the examiner article, right? Now it's up to you when you find time to read the examiner article on procedures, but please take a time out to read the examiner article, because that will really improve uh, your writing of procedures. Okay, please again, just a reminder, if you have any questions which are not being responded in the live session, please put them on the WhatsApp group so that they can be responded properly. Okay, back to the last phase of this day two session. Now we've learned a lot, right? Now let's apply that. Now when it comes to the application, which is a big problem with students, now we have learned so far, so forth, we have learned how to write a good procedure, right? And how to write a good procedure is equal to 2. Adaptive plus ASP. Now let's apply that. Adaptive plus ASP. Okay, let me take on the first question for the session. Right, I hope you remember, just prior to the break, we need to make procedures on classification of the 50% equity shareholding in WTC as a joint venture. So when we start making procedures on this, examiner is saying you need to make 4 procedures. We have 4 marks, right? So we need to make 4 procedures on the classification of the 50% equity shareholding in WTC as a joint venture. Now, this is given in the case study. So I'll go down and I'll take the paragraph which relates with the WTC shareholding, which is the paragraph number 2. I'll just copy paste this paragraph, which is about the shareholding, 50% shareholding in WTC. I take this paragraph and I bring this to my Word file, and now I can see this paragraph in front of my screen. I want to convert this paragraph now to writing 4 procedures. What was the examiner asking us to do? Examiner was saying that you need to write 4 procedures on this. So do I have a flat fact given in the case study, the paragraph above? And should I convert this paragraph into writing 4 procedures? Let's see how to go about it. Can you just read this paragraph in like 1 minute before I convert this to procedures? Just start reading the paragraph in front of your screen in March 2016. Start reading this paragraph. Okay, now let's see what's exactly happening in the case. In March 2016, ZCG, which is the company of which we are the auditor, ZCG purchased a 50% equity shareholding in WTC. Now, is that a very important event which will have a board minutes? Or is that like an ordinary event which will not have a board minutes? Will it have a board minutes? I need your response coming in too quickly. Okay, so should I convert the first fact into my first procedure? Number 1, I will say review the board minutes to confirm the approval of the investment made in WTC and to understand the business rationale for the investment. Whenever the board gives approval of something, the board also discuss the rationale. So in the board minutes, I will not just get the approval. In the board minutes, I will also get the business rationale for something. So that is a complete 1 mark procedure. Okay, ZCG purchased equity. Now, second, if they purchased equity, there must be a legal document like a purchase agreement, like a legal document which will support that you purchased 50% equity shareholding. So will there be a source document of the purchase? We purchased 50% equity shareholding. So what is the source document? So we need to think about the source document in exam paper, which in this case is review the legal documentation supporting the investment in WTC and agree the details of the investment exactly the legal support in the legal documentation or the purchase agreement supporting the investment in WTC and agree the details of investment, which includes how many details of investment we want to confirm. Number one, the date of investment. Number two, amount paid. Number three, number of shares purchased. Do we need to confirm the three things here? The date of investment. What's the date of investment? March 16. How much is the amount paid? $45 million. $45 million was the amount paid. And how much shares we acquired? 50%. Is this procedure clear to everyone? Review the legal documentation supporting the investment in WTC and agree the details of investment, which includes A, B, C. And the total number of shares, right? I wrote that number of shares purchased. See my C answer. 50% shares, 50% equity shareholding was acquired. Okay, now next. Have we classified this investment as a joint venture? So should I confirm 50% shareholding is with ZCG, right? And the other 50% shareholding is with the Wolf Communication. So should I see the agreement between Wolf and ZCG that they both have equal rights and both have equal rights to appoint the members of the board of WTC? Because it is being treated as a joint venture, right? So if it is treated as a joint venture, then both parties should have equal rights to appoint the board members. So should I see some minutes of the meeting between Wolf Communication and ZCG to confirm that they both have the equal rights in the decision making process and they both have equal rights in appointment of the board members, to confirm that this should had been classified as a joint venture, right? So let's make a point on the uh, classification. Now, for a classification, you might make any of these points. Read correspondence or read minutes of meetings between ZCG and Wolf Communication. There must have been some meetings, right, between ZCG and Wolf. You can read the correspondence between ZCG, or you can read the minutes between ZCG and Wolf Communication to confirm that control is shared between the two companies. The control is shared between the two companies, and understand the nature of the relationship. Understand the nature of the relationship in the decision making process and the decision making process. Should both the companies have equal right in the decision making process? Because both have 50% shares, so will both have equal rights? So can I confirm the equality? Can I confirm there is an equal right between Wolf and ZCG? So can that be confirmed from the correspondence and minutes of the meeting between ZCG and the Wolf Communication? Right? So um, is that clear how we take things from the case study and how we convert the things from the case study to ASP? Exactly, Jeevan Soyal. Your question answer is yes. Levish, your question answer you're raising is yes. So you can do that. Abdullah Ghaffar, yes, when you look at the purchase documents will have the terms and conditions, right? But to be very specific in the exam paper, we need to assure that the correspondences which must have happened between Wolf and ZCG over a year do specify that both the companies respect the equality of the shares, and both the companies have a very good relationship of sharing the 50% uh, power in appointing the directors of the company. Uh, right? So, exactly, Sayyid Bukhari, we can even review the shareholding register. Shareholding register of which company? Shareholding register of WTC, because we acquired 50% shares in WTC. So we can review the shareholding register of the WTC as well. Will that confirm that 50% shares are held by ZCG and 50% are held by Wolf Communication? Right? So that's a valid point. So there are two questions popping in. One student is saying we can also do this. Review the shareholding register. Review the shareholding register of Wolf, of WTC to confirm that 50% shares are held by ZCG and the remaining held by Wolf. And there is another student who is saying we can also review the bank statement for the payment of $45 million against the purchase of 50% shareholding. Review the bank statement for the payment of 45 million against the purchase of 50% shareholding in WTC. So these two procedures, 4 and 5, was from the student panel. So I agree with these two procedures so that the students are satisfied that what they're thinking is even right. Yes, obviously, Levish auditor have access to informations, so that's not an issue. The company of which you are the auditor has a substantial shareholding, so through that substantial shareholding, you can even access the records of WTC. Is that clear? I'm moving towards the next situation, right? Now, in the next situation, we purchased a license. In the situation number 2, the examiner wants us to write procedures on the measurement of the intangible assets recognized in respect of the license to operate in farmland. 6 marks. Now, this time, the examiner wants us to write procedures on the license purchased in farmland. Let's see, where is the license purchased in farmland? This paragraph on, on January 2015. So this is where the company took the license. I take this paragraph to my Word file, which is basically the license situation. And let's convert this license situation to the same exercise. Examiner wants us to write procedures on the license for 6 marks. Okay, so how many procedures we need to write? 6. In the first situation, how many procedures we need to write? 4. We wrote 5. So that was just for the sake of learning. We will write 4 procedures in exam paper, right? Now, again, should we read the case for license to know exactly what procedures we should perform on license? I'm reading the case with you. Keep a focus and then tell me what procedures should we be making on license. On January 2015, ZCG purchased a license to operate in farmland. Again, is that a significant event which requires the board approval? Will we be right in writing a board minutes here as per the examiner article? Yes. So ZCG purchased a license to operate. I will just be writing incomplete procedures because the complete procedures are shared with you in the answer of this question. So I'm just saving my time here. I'll just give you a start. Review the board minutes for the purchase of the license, and you will continue writing this procedure yourself. The answer is given and you all have the answers as part of the handouts. Okay, so first thing, we purchased a license. If we purchased a license, will we have review the bank statements for the license? Review the bank statements for the amount paid. How much is the amount we paid? $65 million. Okay, we paid $65 million for this license. So can we confirm that from this? And you continue writing after. Okay, can we review the license agreement or the license purchase agreement? Because we acquired the license, so there must be a license agreement. Will that confirm the tenure of the license? Tenure of the license. What's the tenure of the license? How much years the license is for? 10 years. Tenure of the license, which is 10 years. Can I confirm the cost of the license from this document, etc.? So you need to please complete these procedures, right? The complete procedures are given in the answers, which I have shared with you in the handouts. So you can just see them. I'm just giving you a clue how to pick procedures from a case study. So we purchase something and we're ending down with like 3 procedures. Now, the most critical part of this license is we got this license on the 1st of Jan 2015, and the license lasts for 10 years from the date it was purchased. So from the date it was purchased is the 1st of January, 10 years. Since purchasing the license, ZCG has established the network coverage in farmland, and network became operational on July 2016. So the amortization of the license will start from 1st of January 2015, or will the amortization of the license start from 1st July 2016? When will the amortization of the license start? From Jan 2015 or from July 2016? From July 2016, right? When it became operational. When it became operational. So what should be the period of amortization? Should the period of amortization be 10 years or should the period of amortization be 8.5 years? Is everyone picking how we get 8.5 years? January 15, in 2015, that is 1 year. Then in 2016, that is the second year. Halfway through the second year, it became operational. So 10 minus 1.5. So we have to charge amortization for 8.5 years. So uh, can I confirm from the can I recalculate the amortization expense? Can I recalculate the amortization expense? Can I show the working to examiner? $65 million divided by 8.5 years is equal to how much? 65 million divided by 8.5 million dollars, 8.5 years is equal to how much? Okay, so you can fill in the answers, right? Is equal to how much? Okay, one student has responded, is equal to 7.6 million approximately, $7.6 million. And continue the procedure after. Confirm the accuracy of this. Okay, then next. See the last two lines. It says the license, I'm reading the case study again. The license was recognized as an intangible asset at cost in the group statement of financial position as at the 31st of December 2015. Did we need to recognize any amortization till 31st of December 2015? Did we need to recognize any amortization till 31st of December 2015? No. Amortization will start from when? When will the amortization start? The next year. So has the management recorded the license at the year end rightly? They have recorded the license at a cost, right? Because there was no amortization till the year end. Okay, the last line. Since the network became operational, customer demand has been less than anticipated due to competitor offering a special deal, so on and so forth. Is there an indicator of impairment here? So should I discuss the indicator of impairment with management? Should I review any impairment review performed by management? Do you all pick there is an indicator of impairment because the demand has been less? So should the license be reviewed for impairment because the demands there has been less than anticipated demand due to a competitor offering a special deal? So should I discuss the indicator with management and should I confirm from the management have they reviewed them for impairment, the license? Right. You have the answer of this question shared with you. In the answer, I have given 9 procedures for the sake of knowledge. You need to choose any 6 procedures to write the answer, right? So please skim through my answer because my answer will guide you about many more procedures to write, and then you can choose any 6 procedures to write. Review any impairment review. Management performs the calculation, right, of the impairment. So you can see the management working basically. The management working will become the source document. Okay, so that ends the story number one, which is procedures. You I have shared with you not just the answer of this question, I have also shared with you the answer of a question which is on work in progress and the government grant. I will prefer that you do the question on work in progress and government grant the way I did it in the session, and then reconcile your answer with my answer, right? Uh, yes, Nazmul Sab, your question answer is yes, you can do that, right? So that completes the first exercise. Now let's start on with the second exercise. So will you be practicing procedures under the guidance provided to you? And do you have an assurity that this way you will be writing far better procedures in exam paper? So are you feeling more confident on taking on procedures in exam paper now? Okay. What is the first thing you will do when you're writing a procedure in exam paper? Will you keep it adaptive to the case? Have you understood the meaning of keeping it adaptive to the case? Have I demonstrated you how you keep it adaptive to the case on a license and joint venture? And have you all realized ASP? And when you write a procedure, will you proofread your procedure in exam paper? Because when you proofread your procedure in exam paper, you might find something is missing in your procedure, like why, what, how. So will you make a habit of proofreading your procedure? And if you proofread your procedure, you might find many problems in your own procedure. So you need to proofread your question answers. Yes, that's the detail of the procedure, right? Procedures are written like sentences, right? Procedures are not written like a paragraph, but again, the procedure should not be ambiguous. No, if the examiner asks you to write six procedures, the examiner will only be checking the first six procedures, right? So if you're writing 10 procedures, you're wasting your own time. Examiner will only be checking the first six procedures, and out of the first six procedures, whichever is right, whichever is wrong, the examiner will give you the marks. Examiner will not be reading all your 10 procedures. Okay, the second exercise now. Evidence. In the last exams, March 2019, it was highly anticipated that the examiner will give a question on evidence, and the examiner did. Now, if any of you are repeating P7, you must know that in the past many exam sittings, a question on evidence is a regular feature. Now, if you want to do practice on evidence, first of all, you need to see my past webinars, past practice to pass sessions, which is on Vimeo, on ACCA Pakistan channel. So you can access my previous webinars, which will give you plenty of insights on writing evidence. Now, if I want to give you some guidance on how to attempt a question on evidence, what is the question on evidence? The question on evidence is comment on the matters and explain the audit evidence you should expect to find during a review of the working paper file, question mark, right? That's a very typical question on evidence. And under the new format of the paper, this is a question which ideally fits in question 2, because this is a question which is made at the completion stage of the audit. during the review of the working paper. So at what stage of the audit we review the working paper? We review the working papers at the stage of completion and finalization. So this question can fit in the question number 1? Not at all. So this question has to fit in the question number 2 of the exam paper, where it was even placed in the March 2019 exams. Now let's understand what exactly the examiner wants us to do in a question like such. First of all, the examiner is saying that you have to comment on the matters. Now when you comment on the matters, examiner has given the definition of matters so many times in the past paper. But if you don't read the examiner reviews, criticisms, you will never understand what is the meaning of comment on the matters. Just to give you a glimpse from an examiner report that what exactly comment on the matter means. There is an examiner report in front of your screen now, and there was a question here. Question number 2, right? This is a question which has been shared with you as part of the session question, which is with you in the handout section, which is basically an exam question from September 17 exams. I am reading the criticism of the examiner, that what exactly the examiner wants from a student when the examiner asks comment on the matters. The first paragraph. The question focused on matters and evidence and was set at the completion stage of the audit. So are you getting the examiner wordings here? It was set at the completion stage of the audit and was familiar or similar to the question 4 of the June 17 exam. So examiner is also telling you that this question is not an unusual question. This question comes many times in the past paper. In such a question, candidates are required to cover the matters arising from each of the issues flagged during audit, where marks are awarded for the calculation and conclusion on materiality. So what is the first matter the examiner wants you to write? Calculation and conclusion on materiality. So examiner is saying the first matter you will write is the calculation and conclusion on materiality. So that's the first matter, right? Calculation and conclusion on materiality. Number 2, for knowledge of the appropriate accounting treatment. So the second thing you need to apply is the appropriate accounting treatment. So you need to write the treatment, appropriate accounting treatment. And the third thing you need to write is identify risk or a misstatement from the situation. So examiner is giving you a very clear definition of what to write when a question comes on matters. Right? So that means that when a question comes on matters, we are writing three things. Materiality, we will determine the materiality and we will comment on the materiality. Number 2, we will briefly explain the accounting treatment. And lastly, we will be identifying the risk of material misstatement. That is, what is understated or overstated. Just like the question we did yesterday, risk. The marking scheme is very different. Yesterday, if you remember the live session, we almost do the same thing in a question on ROMM and audit risk. Is that true? Is that exactly the same thing we do in a question on ROMM and audit risk? If I get your quick response to that. But how many marks were we gaining in a question yesterday when we do materiality, accounting treatment, and identify the risk? How many marks were we gaining yesterday? 3. But when a question comes on evidence and the examiner says comment on the matters, then examiner says materiality is worth 1.5 marks, accounting treatment is worth 1.5 marks, and the risk is worth 1.5 marks. So for every comment, how many marks are we getting? For every comment, we are getting 1.5 marks. So I used to make a mnemonic, which most of you are already telling me. This has been a very common mnemonic I use in my sessions. That comment on the matters is basically MTR. M is the materiality, T is the treatment, R is the risk. How many marks will I get for the MTR in a question on evidence? 4.5 marks. And if I do the same MTR in a question on audit risk, how many marks will I get? 3. Is everyone clear on that? Okay, that's great. So whenever you see a question on evidence, you will first identify the materiality, you will then think about the accounting treatment, and you will then think about the risk of material misstatement. So that's not an issue because we learned that yesterday. The only thing good is we are getting more marks here. Okay, then comes the second thing. In terms of the second thing, we need to focus on evidence. You should expect to find in the review of the working paper file. So who is reviewing the working paper file? Who is the you here? You should expect to find during the review of the working paper file. Who is conducting the review? The manager. Perfect. So you is equal to the manager. Manager is conducting a review of the working paper file. Now, when a manager conducts a review of the working paper file consists of fill in the blank. What is in the working paper file? If you are a manager, what is in the working paper file? Documents. What is in the working paper file? The working paper file consists of documents, or the working paper file consists of the documentary evidence gathered during the course of audit. Right? Now, for example, we just did some exercise on license, and we did some field work on the license. Just now we did the field work on the license, right? Let's copy paste that. This is the field work we did on license. Let's copy that and paste it over here. Okay, now this is the field work performed by senior. Just an example, right? Now, you have performed the field work on the license. You are all seniors, right? Suppose I am the manager and I have to review your file on license. Now, when I start to look at the file on the license, working paper file for license, So what evidence will I expect in this file? Now, first of all, I would expect in this file of license the copy of the board minutes. Will that confirm to me as a manager that you have reviewed the board minutes? So how will I know as a manager that you have reviewed the board minutes? If I see the copy of the board minutes in the file, as a manager, will I be assured that you reviewed the board minutes as a senior? Is that correct? So copy of the board minutes is the evidence to confirm. Continue the statement after. Review the bank statement. If you review the bank statement, what will be in the file? Copy of the bank statement to confirm something. So whatever you do as a senior, everything you do as a senior becomes your working paper. And who reviews the working paper? The manager. So if the manager have a license file in front of him, the manager will see in the license file the copy of the board minutes, the copy of the bank statement, review the license agreement. Again, there would be a copy of the license agreement to confirm something. So are you all getting this point that evidence, what is evidence? Evidence is a documentary evidence gathered during the course of the audit, which goes into the file. And why every time we are writing the word copy, 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 copy? What is the reason for that? Anyone will respond for the reason? Because all the documents belongs to the management, board minutes. So can I put the original board minutes in my file? Can I put the original board minutes in my file? No. So I have to use the word copy. Okay. Recalculate the amortization expense. Now when you recalculate something in the file, you will have results of the recalculation. Results of recalculation. So when the auditor recalculates something, in the file there will be a result of the recalculation to confirm something. I'm using exactly the same words the examiner tends to use in the answer, right? So results of recalculation sounds better. Okay, then next, auditor discuss with the management. Again, when you discuss with the management, in the working paper file, you will have notes of discussion with management to confirm something. Notes of. So can you see how am I converting the procedures to evidence, so to give you an idea that how things are in the audit? Are you understanding the phases of audit, that in the first phase we gather procedures that can come as a different question, and the second phase of the audit is to find the evidence in the working paper file that can come as a separate question? Review any impairment review performed by the management. So if the management has performed any impairment review, will I be having the copy of um, management working, management impairment working, copy of the management impairment working to confirm something? So impairment review, right? Whose impairment review? Management. So will I have a copy of this impairment review in my file? So have you got the clue of evidence? Copy, another copy, another copy, results, notes, yet another copy. So what will the manager expect to find in my file? Documentary evidence, right? And are you understanding the form of the documentary evidence? Is everyone clear on the form of the documentary evidence? Okay, just a last example here. For example, in my procedure, I say obtain a representation, obtain a representation from the management. Just an example, though we don't need to have a representation for the license, right? Just an example, just an example, just a layman example. So if I have a procedure, obtain a representation from the management. Now, when I see my working paper file, I will not say copy of the representation because it is not the management document. It is not the management document. So in my working paper file, I will say representation, representation from the management to confirm something. See, I didn't use the word, I didn't use the word copy. Are you getting the point? So if a document belongs to the auditor, we will never use the word copy. But if the document belongs to the management, we will use the word copy. Is everyone clear on that? So can I conclude on something here? The likelihood of a question like such is very dim, right? Because it came into the March 19 exams, but you should still practice it. Now, 1 mark per evidence, and when you're writing 1 mark per evidence, the evidence should is the evidence is equal to the documentary form plus the reason. Can you see my list of 1 to 7? Documentary form is in the yellow, and after the documentary form, can you see every time I'm writing to confirm? So to gain 1 mark, I will start with a documentary evidence, and after the end of the documentary evidence, I will confirm the reason. Right? So 1 mark per evidence. So are you clear with the marking scheme? If a question comes on matters and evidence, how many marks will we get for every matter? 1.5 marks every matter. How many matters we should be writing? How many matters are we writing? 3. How many marks are we gaining with the 3 matters? 4.5. And how many marks we have for writing evidence? 1. Okay, that's perfect. Okay, last example. Just want to show you something. I'm not drilling this question. I've shared the answer of this question with you, so you can perform this yourself. The answer has been shared. Uh, if I just show you this question, which I have included for my session today, uh, can you see the requirement of the question here in front of your screen, which is included in the session? Can you just read this requirement? Can you just read this requirement in within a minute? So are you clear with the requirement? Comment on the matters, and you know what exactly you should be doing with matters. The moment you see this word matter in an exam paper, you know exactly that you need to write MTR, right? And then the examiner is asking us to write audit evidence. The moment I see the word audit evidence, I should be thinking about copy of, results of, notes of. That's something I'm thinking, right? Examiner is saying you are not required to explain. You are not required to explain the impact on the report. Because a lot of times student thinks that this question comes at a completion stage. And because the question comes at a completion stage, they think we have to write a impact on the report. So does the matter includes impact on report? No. This is exactly what the examiner clarifies, right? Are we thinking about the MTR, or are we thinking about the MT and impact on report? So please never write an impact on report in a question on evidence. Even though the question on evidence is structured at the stage of completion, but you will still not write the impact on report in a question on evidence. So the mnemonic remains MTR. So how many times we ignore statements given by examiner? You are not required. I believe in an exam paper, we never read such statements. Do we read such statements, or do we just leave them in a hurry? You are not required. So please make a habit of reading the complete statement of the examiner rather than making a hypothetical assumption about what examiner is asking from you. Okay, now one last thing. When you go up, can you see examiner is asking us to write matters and evidence on trade receivables? Examiner is writing us to write procedure evidence on depreciation. An examiner is asking us to write matters on decommissioning provision. So easy. How many marks I have for decommissioning provision here? How many marks I have for decommissioning provision? 10. How many marks will I gain on matters of decommissioning provision? 4.5. I will find the materiality of the decommissioning provision, right? I will find the accounting treatment of the decommissioning provision, and I will find the risk of the decommissioning provision. How many marks will I gain from 10? 4.5. How many marks will I be left with? So how many evidences should I be writing? 6 evidences. Let's make one clear structure so that you know how to go with the marking scheme. 10, 8, and 7. We have 3 situations in this question which you have to do yourself. 10, 8, 7. So if I go back to my Word file, and I've shared with you a December 2017 question, question number 2 of the December 2017 exams. In this December 2017 exams, we have this situation. We have a decommissioning provision, right? We have uh, depreciation, and we have trade receivables. These are the 3 situations, right, given in the December 17 question. How many things we have to do? We have to write matters, and we have to write evidence in working paper file. How many marks we have? We have 10 marks for decommissioning provision. We have 8 marks for depreciation. We have 7 marks for the trade receivable. In total, how many marks we have? 25 marks. Now, for a decommissioning provision, I will first have the M. For a decommissioning provision, I will first have the T, and then I will have the R. And how many marks will I take from here? 4.5 marks. For depreciation, I will have M. For depreciation, I will have the T. I think there was a change in the useful life. So you need to focus on the change in the useful life when you're writing the treatment, that change in the accounting estimate, because the management changed the useful life of the assets. So you need to focus on the change in accounting estimates, basically, treatment. And the last is the risk. I will take 4.5 marks. Then for the trade receivables, I will have the materiality of the trade receivable. I will have the accounting treatment of the trade receivable, that is basically the bad debts, and then the risk associated with trade receivables, and I will get 4.5 marks. The answer has been shared with you, but I will prefer that you write this yourself first before you see the answer. So I'll take 4.5 marks. And now I come to the column 2. So I have total 10 marks, right? So out of the 10, I got 4.5. So how many evidences I should be writing? 5.5 marks. So in total, how many evidences should I write? 6 evidences. In the next one, I have 8 marks. Out of the 8 marks, I have already taken my 4.5 marks here. So how many marks should I be allocating to evidences? 3.5 marks. So how many evidences should I be writing? 4 evidences. 7 marks. 4.5 already gone. So how many marks I left with? 2.5 marks. So how many evidences should I be writing? 3 evidences. Now tell me one thing. How many times the students who are attending the live session and repeating the AAA paper, and you get a question like such? Suppose someone of you are attempting the AAA paper for the 3rd time, for the 4th time, for the 5th time. How many of time you have attempted a question on matters and evidence without a planning? This table in front of your screen is a planning table, and I believe student never makes planning table in the exam paper. They never do planning of a question. They just attack the question. Is this planning table helping you to know how to bifurcate the marks and how to go about with the provision, depreciation, and receivable? I don't understand why you don't do a planning of a question. Why you start writing an answer or reading the question without doing a careful planning? Remember, ACCA recommends that 1/4 of the time should be spent on planning. And none of the students spend 1/4 time on planning of the total paper, total time in the paper, right? Total time is 3 hours, right? Out of the 3 hours, 1/4 of the time should be spent on planning, because if you do planning in the 3/4 time, you can write a very good answer. But if you don't do planning, then the problem is you're not writing a good answer. Now, do you all know that you write evidence with the word copy? You write evidence with the word results. You write evidence with the word notes, or you write evidence something in original form. I just demonstrated that during the session. And when you're writing the matters, you need to write 3 matters: materiality, treatment, and risk of material misstatement. So was this table helpful? And after making the table, if you attack the question, will you better attack the question? Yes or no? Now can you attack the December 17 question in a better way? So you have to attack this question, right? Your self answer has been shared with you, so please kindly see the answer. But I will prefer that you attack the question first, make your own answer, then see how much of the answer is reconciling with my answer, right? The final recap of things we learned on day two. Do you all agree this day two was an important day, and throughout the session today, you have learned something important? Do you believe this day two will be helping you on the 3rd of June when you're sitting in the exam hall and perhaps attempting a question on a procedure, perhaps attempting a question on evidence? So has this session really helped you in understanding some of the problems you do in your exam sittings, particularly those students who get flunked at 47, 48, and 49? There are many students in AAA paper who might be repeating the paper for the third time, for the fourth time, for the fifth time. I believe if some of you are in the session, you must start to realize your mistakes, because the sooner you realize the mistakes, the better for you. And there are examiner articles to support you. Please make a habit of reading the examiner articles, because if you're not reading the examiner articles, then again you might be doing the same mistakes again. Okay, let's take a final quick recap of the day so that you know exactly what we got through the session today. Number one recap: when we are drafting procedures, we should first know the marking scheme. Second, we should know that the procedures have to be adaptive to case. We should know the common errors from the examiner article, and we should know action, we should know source, and we should know purpose to write a good procedure. Then when you're writing something on evidence in exam paper, you should know that the evidence question is bifurcated, and the question is bifurcated into two parts. The first part of the question asks you to comment on the matters, and the second part of the question asks you for evidence in working paper file. You should know the bifurcation of matters. The matters bifurcations are three. One is M. The matter bifurcation is M. The matter bifurcation is T. The matter bifurcation is R. And each will give you a score of 1.5 plus 1.5 plus 1.5, and you take your marks up to 4.5 marks. Then when you're writing evidence in the working paper file, you should know that the evidence has to be something of a documentary form. And when you think about a documentary form, the documentary form consists of either a copy, it consists of either a results, it consists of either notes, it consists of something in the original form. Then the last thing you should know is that what are common mistakes we do. For that, you can read the examiner reports, plenty of examiner reports, which you can read through, and you can understand what problems we do in a question on evidence, right? So try to give me a quick feedback of the session today. How was the session today? Uh, be quick, be responsive. Um, in terms of giving your quick feedback upon the session today. and your learnings from the session today. What has been the unique learning from the session today? Rather than just focusing on the response of the session, what you learned from the session today? Uh, each one of you. What was the picking point of the session today? Let's do a quick survey. What was the picking point? Okay, one student is saying the marking scheme. One is saying ASP. Okay, ASP is a very common answer. Marking scheme is a very common answer. Planning, approach to the question, approach to the question. Wonderful. Marking scheme, adaptive. So that means all of you learned something, right? From the question techniques on the day two. So I'm still waiting for your overall response of the session. Day one was risk, day two was evidence and procedures, and tomorrow, day three, we are assembling back for a live session from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. And the session tomorrow is on ethical, professional, and quality control issues. So we are assembling live for the day three tomorrow, ethical, professional, and quality control issues. And again, you will realize your mistakes on the ethical, professional, and quality control issues tomorrow, as you must have realized your mistakes on this on the topic evidence and procedures. The purpose of these sessions is to boost your confidence, and if your confidence is boosting, that's wonderful, because through these sessions, ACCA Pakistan wants to address your problems, wants to address your issues and weaknesses, the problems you do in the AAA exam, and ACCA Pakistan wants to give you a platform through which you can rectify your problems and gain a pass standard, right? So you have the resources with you, which contains the session questions and session answers, and then there are plenty of homework questions for you to perform. And the more you practice, the better for you, and will be wonderful for you for the 3rd of June. It was good to see all of you here in the live session, and your participation in the live session was very good. That was good enthusiasm shown by all the students today in the session, and wonderful to see all your good comments about the session today, which are coming in. Um, just into the last 1 minute of the session today now. Uh, please remember one thing, that most of the time when we look at the AAA paper, we don't realize that in the AAA paper, we are writing a very immature answer. Most of the time, we are not writing the answer which is up to the standard of a manager. And a lot of times, students ask me, how can we reach the level of a manager? And my one-liner answer to the students is practice. The more you practice, the better for you. Because obviously, most of you might not be in an audit firm, right? Most of you have not even attained the position of a manager, even if you are in an audit firm. So the only way you can learn that through practice. So practice is the critical success factor for the triple exams. The more, the better. Okay, it's time to say you goodbye then. Have a nice day. Implement what you learned today. And I will be seeing you live tomorrow on the day three with the focus on ethical, professional, and quality control issues. Do you all believe this is a very problematic area for all of you, ethical, professional, and quality control issues? How many of you are weak in this area, ethical, professional, and quality control issues? So I think you will be then very focused on the session tomorrow, because I personally believe this is one of the weakest area of the students, ethical, professional, and quality control issues. They do so many blunders, right? So if you think you are weaker, then you have an opportunity tomorrow, right? So do join in for the live opportunity tomorrow from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. the Pakistan Standard Time for the day three of the AAA Practice to Pass webinar being organized by ACCA Pakistan. I am Kashif Kamran, your tutor, and it's time to sign off the session. Goodbye, Allah Hafiz, have a nice day, and I'll see you tomorrow.